Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and our ranking members here today for this joint hearing. And while USDA and USAID currently provide life-saving support to people around the world in a manner that I think ensures minimal fraud, they're not perfect. But what we're hearing, of course, is these food aid programs support our maritime industry, an industry that's crucial for our U.S. national security. And what we've heard is a strong U.S. maritime industry prepares our nation not only for the threats today, but the threats that we can't even comprehend tomorrow. And I just want to urge these committees to consider the impacts of food aid reform that are being discussed. I certainly want to make our aid more efficient and accountable, but not if it means compromising a critical industry for our national security. So we've heard how more cargo supports our maritime industry and our U.S. flag ships. And we've sort of touched on a little bit, but the actual delivery of aid and food is compromised if we're just talking about cash, not just because of the fraud issue, but let's remember some of the emergencies that we've had recently. The Philippines that was ravaged by a typhoon, and we fed millions in the months that followed. But if we had relied just on developing farms or cash to buy locally grown food, where was the capacity to purchase that food? And so I just really want to talk about the actual delivering of the aid, whether it be natural disasters or climate change. It seems to me that we are having more drought. We're having more natural disasters. So if we switch to buying locally, and I'm going to ask this to Mr. Berteau, what happens if that's where our focus is, if we're focused on buying locally and cash instead of delivering food? How is this impacted by these natural disasters in the areas where we're attempting to deliver aid?
Congresswoman, I think I would refer back to a little bit of what Congressman Kelly said. The national security implications of this are much broader than just the Defense Department point of view. And one of the realities that we face today is there's actually no part of the world that doesn't matter anymore. Everything matters. It used to be there were places we could ignore and no bad consequences would come from it. When it comes to our ability to respond to major natural disasters, obviously defense plays a critical role in both providing the capability to respond and the capacity to respond at the level we need to. But we do that in response really to the requirements that come from the broader national security community, interagency process, and the White House. We don't generate those requirements. So I can't really analyze the specifics of the food aid impact of cash versus food in a generic sense there. I know that when we are responding to a particular crisis, what we bring is the capacity to deliver. We don't have the stocks of food ourselves, but we bring the capacity to both create not only the carrying capacity, but the infrastructure at the receiving end to be able to offload and distribute in country. And we've got that capability inherent in our military today. And it's, I think, one of the key elements of shaping and engaging in nations all around the world that create the kind of bonds that we need to have with those nations in order to foster the kind of future we need to have.
But again, could you specifically talk about, how, the attempt to reform this by buying locally or using cash would be impacted in a region that was destroyed, where there is no food, where there is a drought, where there is a national disaster? I mean, I think we would be very short-sighted to, not realize that we could be reforming this to an extent that would be impractical in the very regions that we're asked to help and deliver aid.
Congresswoman Hahn, I would point out that typically the U.S. response in humanitarian crisis is to match the response to what the need is. And I'm sure in a case where what you're referring to, we would have to supply the right food, what I would call in kind, versus a local and regional purchase if there's not the infrastructure to be able to support that. So typically our response is in a nature is tailored to the humanitarian crisis.
So you would think it would be short-sighted for us to move away from delivering food or having the agricultural capacity or the maritime industry capacity to do that as opposed to just a move towards cash and buying locally.
I would point out that the fiscal year 16 budget is to provide the flexibility for up to 25%. It's not that it's going to be 25%, and that's been the administration position.
Thank you. Yield back.
I see